Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast, your home for Pittsburgh Penguins news and analysis. You can find us on YouTube at Tip of the Ice-Burgh. Make sure you like, share, subscribe if you liked this video, or you can catch us anywhere you get your podcast from. I'm your host, Nick Belsky, and it's a Monday, which means we are going to dive into our Pittsburgh Penguins power rankings. But before we get into that, obviously, biggest news of the day surrounding Penguins star center Evgeni Malkin and the injury that he sustained over the weekend in the Pens' loss to the Seattle Kraken. Malkin left Saturday's game against Seattle in the first period following a collision with Kraken forward Chandler Stevenson. It looked like Evgeni Malkin's knee buckled. He went to the bench, according to, Phil Bourque and Josh Getzoff on the broadcast. He was trying to loosen it up, standing up, sitting back down on the bench, trying to make sure that he could try to go. He did try to get back out there on the ice, took a shift later in the first period, and it didn't work. He ended up going back down the tunnel and did not return for the remainder of that game. Well, today we learned a little bit more about Malkin's injury, including the fact that he is expected to only miss, quote, a few weeks, according to Rob Rossi of The Athletic. A couple hours later, Malkin was officially deemed week to week, according to Mike Sullivan. Shout out to Pens Inside Scoop, who posted that update earlier in the afternoon. Now, that means Evgeni Malkin is likely out. Again, who knows? But he's likely out until the Four Nations face-off concludes. That is 6 games between now and the Four Nations break, including the final 2 of this season-long 7-game homestand, and then a handful of home games, and then Metro games to close out their schedule leading into the second week of February. So with that in mind, what are the Penguins going to do? Malkin is out week to week. Fortunate that he's not going to be out longer, because that injury looked very, very bad, especially for a guy who's had multiple reconstructive knee surgeries. Again, shout out to Rob Rossi of The Athletic for pointing that out. But how do the Pens respond? How do they react? How do they kind of fill the void of Evgeni Malkin going forward? Well, in a response move, they did recall Jesse Puljujärvi, so they add a forward to the lineup. Puljujärvi did join the Penguins out there, currently in San Jose for Game 6 of this 7-game road trip, but he did not get into the forward line rushes at morning skate earlier today. Again, according to Pens Inside Scoop, this is what the line rushes looked like this afternoon. Brian Rust returned from a lower body injury. He's a game-time decision tonight, but he skated alongside Sidney Crosby and Rickard Rakell, putting back together that first line that has been very, very good for the Penguins. It is going to have to be very good for the Penguins if Malkin does miss more than the extended period of time. Michael Bunting was centered by Cody Glass and then also flanked by Anthony Beauvillier on the second line. Bunting and Glass have been playing together over the last handful of games, and Glass bumped into the middle once Malkin left in Seattle on Saturday. So no surprise that he ends up being the exact replacement in that lineup spot for Evgeni Malkin. Anthony Beauvillier bumps from the first line down to the second. He's been playing well of late. I didn't think he had a great performance against the Kraken, but he's definitely a good option for them in the top 6 the way that he's been playing. Third line remains the same, which I also think is a really good idea. O'Connor, Hayes, and Tomasino have been working well together the last few games. You're hoping that they can start to find the back of the net a little bit more, but the process leading up to that point has looked pretty good. Kevin Hayes has created a lot of offensive chances. Phil Tomasino is kind of finding a role there on the third line, and Drew O'Connor is forechecking very well of late and utilizing his speed and size in a way that you want him to, especially on this line where he is going to be kind of the straw that stirs the drink, making sure that he creates turnovers and creates opportunities for the other two in Hayes and Tomasino. So that remains the third line, and the fourth line is the same as it was on Saturday. Boko Imama, Noel Acciari, and Matt Nieto, kind of your prototypical change of pace line, your prototypical defense first line, and that's what you're going to see likely later tonight against the San Jose Sharks. But I mean, going forward, this lineup can change a heck of a lot, because you take out Evgeni Malkin, and I understand he missed those couple of games earlier in the month due to a smaller injury, comes back. He didn't look great. He scored a goal in that win over the LA Kings, but he hasn't really looked himself. It's kind of a lull, a dip in performance for Evgeni Malkin, as you would expect out of a 38-year-old center that's dealt with multiple injuries throughout his career. But it's still a major loss, especially when you look at the top 6 here. Bunting, Glass, Beauvillier. I've liked a lot of what Michael Bunting's done. I'm going to bring him up later in this episode when we get to the power rankings. Cody Glass is a guy that has looked really good in almost every position that the Penguins have put him in. The problem was he just hasn't been able to finish. 3 goals on the season. He had a stretch of 2 goals in 3 games at the end of last week. He's going to need to do much more of that if Evgeni Malkin is going to miss anything more than the 6 games that we all expect him to miss leading into the Four Nations face-off. But, I mean, offense is going to be limited. That's just a fact of life. Their defense is going to have to step up. Their goaltending is going to have to step up because you look at the offensive side of the ice. I mean, the power play can't get much better than it's been throughout the month of January, clocking in at 29.4%, which is 8th in the NHL. So the power play is going to need to keep pace just to keep them where they're at. The top players are going to have some more pressure on them. That's probably Crosby, Rakell, Russ. That line's been really good, but all eyes are going to be on them to keep the offense up. And then the third line, like I mentioned earlier, they need to finish. A lot of chances against Seattle. I liked most of their game on Saturday, but nothing to show for it. No goals to show for it. They need to be able to finish their chances when they get them. I think they've been great at creating them, but sometimes you got to put the biscuit in the basket to actually be considered a line that should stay together for the long term. Like I said, the lines that we saw today are interesting. Yes, Puljujärvi's back with the Penguins. I'm certain he'll get an opportunity if offense starts to dip here in the next couple of games without Evgeni Malkin. Let's close out this episode with the power rankings. I'm not going to dive too deep into these simply because, well, when you lose 5-1 to the Anaheim Ducks and then 4-1 to the Seattle Kraken, that's 2/3 of your week. Not many things are going to change in the power rankings. I will say the one big thing that changed, Michael Bunting supplants Alex Nedeljkovic. Nedeljkovic bumped up there because he had played a handful of really good games following the dismissal of Tristan Jarry from the NHL roster. That's why he was up there last week. This week, I think I got to put Michael Bunting back in. He's been locked in on the power play, which has been huge for the Penguins. Going to have to continue that up with Malkin out. 9 power play goals leads the Pittsburgh Penguins for Michael Bunting, and he just brings a level of energy on most nights that kicks the Penguins into gear. I didn't see that much on Saturday. Part of that might have been the fact that it was a 1 o'clock start on the Western Conference. I don't think any of the Penguins looked particularly good in the first period to play that game, but you need Michael Bunting to bring that energy more often than not. Typically he does, especially this season, and that's why he's jumping into the top 5 here at number 5. 4 through 1, I'm not going to mince words. Like I said, 5-1 loss to Anaheim, 4-1 loss to the LA Kings. I'm not changing a damn thing. Rickard Rakell is at number 4. Erik Karlsson's at number 3. Sidney Crosby sticks at number 2. And Brian Rust is going to be at number 1. If he was set to miss a handful more games, Crosby would have easily supplanted him, but nothing was doing on Saturday. Crosby had a nice goal. That was good. But overall performance wasn't enough for me to switch things around. And Brian Rust, even in the game that he got injured, had a beautiful pass to set up Michael Bunting on the power play for their lone goal in that one. So no changes in 4 through 1. Top 5 goes as follows. Michael Bunting at number 5. Rickard Rakell at number 4. Erik Karlsson sticks at number 3. I still think he's playing at a very, very high level over these last handful of weeks. Sidney Crosby at number 2. Again, nothing against him. I just like the way Brian Rust has played a little bit more over the last couple of weeks. You could probably switch either of them, and I'm not going to give you too much of an issue with either of them. I think both of them have been playing good, but I'm going to give Brian Rust the nod for the second week in a row. But that's going to do it for this episode of The Tip of the Ice-Burgh. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this one. Remember, you can find us on YouTube at Tip of the Ice-Burgh. Make sure you like, share, subscribe if you liked this video, or you can catch us anywhere you get your podcasts from. We'll be back with a full episode of The Tip of the Ice-Burgh tomorrow with Nick Horwat and myself, Nick Belsky, excuse me. But that's it for this one. We'll see you guys next time.